Alright, so we are finally running smooth, idling smooth, and we have no warning lights all over the dash. Let's see here, we click OK. We are back good. We have no codes. Let's see here. Key on engine running. This will take a second. Let's scan this thing. Alright, so this is all we got. So it looks like a O2, a cylinder head, temperature out of range. My 6.2 F250 actually had this, and then it went away once we started driving it. Transmission control switch, overdrive cancel, circuit out of read, codes range. So nothing alarming here. Let's look at O2. The head sensors on the back of the head. Hopefully that will just clear up. Nothing has triggered the check engine light, and we're still manually in neutral from the bottom of the truck, and we still can't shift. So when I put my foot on the brake, I can't do anything with the shifter, so I don't know what's going on with that. So I'm gonna guess that that has something to do with the transmission control switch. We'll need to look into, but I mean, she idles beautifully, sounds good. Of course we have an airbag light on because we have the sensor undone up front, and the brake light is because the emergency brake is on because we are actually in neutral and I have no control over it up here. We did everything underneath the truck to get it on the frame rack. So if we go back, we have no codes. The restraint control module, of course that's going to be because the airbag sensor is unplugged up front, but besides that, this truck is clean of no codes, idling good, all the wires have good connections, everything's back together correctly. So we're going to chase them three things there. I'm not too worried about the O2 necessarily, but I probably will go ahead and get it right while it's on the frame rack, just in case for some crazy reason it has something to do with my wiring. I feel like all my wires are good, but who knows. Time to take lunch, let's grab something to eat, and then we'll keep at it with this thing. So on the two wires, or the four wires that we hadn't accounted for, is just a simple mistake of, I guess I was tired. I've been putting in a ton of hours, and I guess my eyes were just tired, and we had a purple with a white stripe, a solid gray, and then our twist up was a gray with a purple stripe and a solid purple. And so the two colors that weren't in the twist up, normally your twist ups are ABS and stuff like that. The two that weren't in the twist up, I had actually connected the other side of the ABS to over here. So I had two straights hanging and then two twist ups. And what it ended up needing to be done was I needed to unhook the two that was over here, hook them in with the straights, and then the twist ups went right together fine. So it's just a simple mistake of, I guess I was tired and missed a couple colors on the wires, but got them all straightened out. All right, so where have I been at for the past 24 hours? It's probably right like that to you on your end, because that's movie magic. But as you can see, we have the white one in here, and we have the front end torn off of it, and we have a blue one up there still with no front end, and it's 24 hours later almost. Let me catch you up to pace on where we're at. So if you want, I just did a video on how to remove a harness out of a 5.0 Coyote F150. I think it's like 09 to 14. If you want to check that video out, and I'll show you how to get this harness out and what all was involved. We're not going to double stack that information in this video, but what happened with this one was our wiring harness, everything was perfect, okay? No error codes, no misfires, no nothing. Everything was running smooth, amazing. I mean, just, you couldn't ask for anything better after I figured out them last two wires, okay? But I went to zip tie this harness up. You can see how it's a mess. Zip tie it tight so I could get electrical tape, put it all back inside wire loom and stuff like that. And after I zip tied it up, I said, well, I've been doing this long enough. Let's just crank the vehicle real fast to see if we have developed any strange electrical from the wires being pulled together. Sure enough, I was right, and we had a bunch of error codes to do with mass airflow sensors, and we have a hill descent code, ABS codes, all that. So all the codes are pointing to the air intake area, throttle body and stuff, and pointing towards ABS stuff. So I cut the zip ties, undid it, moved the wires around a little, cranked the truck up, everything's perfect. No codes again, runs perfect, no missing, nothing. So I said, okay, maybe we looked over the wires, I moved some stuff around, and I said, let's zip tie this thing back up and check it again. I zip tied it up, went to crank it again, and sure enough, same thing, bunch of codes. So I cut the wiring, cut the zip ties again, took it back apart, inspected further, found a pin that was messed up on the ABS module. It was a little loose. I thought it was golden. I addressed the pin issue and went to crank the vehicle, and everything was good to go with no zip ties on nothing. So I was like, cool, let's zip tie it back up again, and re-zip tied it. So let's check it one more time. Went and check it. Of course, the codes were back again. So we're dealing with like the third time now. I even started the time before last electrical taping part of it, and then decided to check it again for the third time. Codes were right back again. So I took it apart, dug deeper and deeper and deeper for wiring, because sometimes you can have a wire that's actually broke inside the insulation, but it's not through the insulation. Normally when that happens though, on a collision, you'll see where the wire took a hit. So I was looking for everywhere the wires took a hit and wiggling them. If it feels soft, like no wire in there because the wire is broke, so it's just rubbery insulation holding it together, I actually cut a couple of them and spliced them also, and still had the codes. So even with the zip ties off, electrical tape off and everything, still had codes. Started fluffing wires up, moving them around, everything like that. This time it was just done. The codes were not going away. So obviously whatever wire was barely hanging on or whatever has now completely lost connection, and we have codes. So at that point I said we need to start looking into just swapping this harness over. I wanted to do the harness swap from the beginning, but it looked like there was a ton involved. So we've got the harness out of the white truck. It is laid all over here on the ground. You can go watch that video on how to pull that harness, so we're not double stacking information. And this series is not supposed to be an informational video anyway. We are going to get this harness pulled out of this truck now. Man, this has turned into a freaking nightmare. And then we are going to get that harness out of the white truck, put into the blue truck. This is probably going to take me all the way into, it is Thursday afternoon, about time to close. This is going to take me all the way through Friday, I'm sure, and into Monday. All right, so what's the update on the F-150? We are sitting in the F-150. The wiring harness out of this guy is not the same for this guy. So the difference that I messed up on as soon as I took that harness out, I did a video on how to pull the harness out because it's pretty much the gist of how to get the harness out. And then what I messed up on was that's a 2-wheel drive. This is a 4-wheel drive. So I knew that, but I figured that maybe the difference in the wiring was inside the cab or on the back half of the harness, because you never know without looking into it where the 4-wheel drive stuff is. Got on the phone with somebody out of where they come, North Carolina, up the road about 3 hours from me, and paid for it on Friday, and it was here on Monday. $460 for this harness, so that's a minor setback, but we now have the harness in. It wasn't that bad. We have got everything up and running. I just test fired the truck, so it does run. All we have is we do have hill descent warning lights and ABS warning lights. We don't have no check engine light, as you can see right there. We don't have the brake piece that's up here in the master cylinder. We haven't swapped the master cylinder over yet, so there's a plug under your master cylinder reservoir that's not plugged in. And then I think both of the front ABS plugs, the little clips are broke, and they're going to need a zip tie throw to pull them tight. So I'm hoping that when we swap the reservoir and tighten up them two plugs, I'm hoping that it will fix all them issues. So I'm going to go take care of that. Go ahead and get the brake reservoir swapped over this afternoon and see where we're at. Uh-oh, we're calling it a wrap for today. This truck is beating my tail in. We still can't get the shifter to pull down and shift. Now on these trucks, there are a couple of things that can go bad, such as the brake switch at the brake pedal. But I have completely took the brake switch out and just have it hanging, because it's the type that when the brake is not pressed, it's pushed in. And then when the brake is pressed, the brake pad or the piece on the brake pedal gets farther away from the switch, opens a little push thing up. So if you take the brake thing out completely, then it's just hanging there. Now that one did come off of this truck right here, this white one, and this white one shifted fine. So that brake switch was perfectly fine when I took it off. Now I don't know if it could have went bad that easily. That don't really make no sense to me that it worked literally the other day perfectly fine on this one, And now on this one, it doesn't work. The one that was on the truck don't work, and then the one that come off of that truck don't work. That thing is kicking my teeth in. I took the cable off at the shifter, got that off, and you can manually pull the cable with your hand and shift it, park, reverse, neutral, and all that perfectly fine. It goes in gear perfectly fine, but it's just that shifter up there will not move to save its life. Now there is a little piece underneath the shifter that you can pull down to bypass it. Whenever I pulled that down to bypass it, to bypass the locking, the interlock mechanisms, it still doesn't even work. And you're supposed to be able to pull that down and then just manually do it in case your brake switch goes bad. It's like an override. But that doesn't even work. So I have no clue what's going on. We got it all in there. So, I mean, at least there's no cut harness. I have swapped over the master cylinder bag, and I actually just took the whole master cylinder out of that one over there instead of messing with them little pins in the bottom. Just swapped the whole one, swapped them lines back that were bent, so we no longer have any bent lines, and we no longer have the bent bracket down there. Swapped the bracket off of that truck also over this one. So all of that is fixed and sitting back right like it's supposed to be. I also had a vacuum leak issue code that was popping up when you undo the four-wheel drive hub actuator. It goes away. So watching some YouTube videos, they say that these hubs leak, and that's what throws that code in there, even though it doesn't throw no light on the dash. So we went ahead and unplugged that just to make sure that was that problem. We've checked all the fuses, all of that stuff. Everything checks out. Nothing is blown or anything like that. Man, dude, this thing has kicked my teeth in, and I'm just spinning my wheels. So today what we are working on is getting our piece right here unlaced, and then we are going to grab the piece off the parts truck, get it over. We pulled all the hoses off this morning that was busted all up, so we're going to go ahead and toss them on today. But before we push this thing outside, I wanted to go ahead and cut this off to kill a little bit of time this morning until I'm ready to push it out. I went ahead and started unlacing this, so flip the camera around and show you just real quickly like how I do this. Okay, we can go ahead and start out by pointing out the correct way to do this. To do this the correct way, you do need to remove your whole dash out of the vehicle. On these body style trucks, your apron up here actually goes through your A-pillar, and it's on the inside. So you access a lot of spot welds from the inside, meaning you got to pull the whole dash out of the vehicle to replace these aprons. And then you'll have to get all your spot welds out of here that tie all this together. I believe there's some across the top. There's going to be some on the inside of this one, and then you'll get all these foam pieces off where it seals it up. This seals it up from where the aprons pass through the A-pillar from the inside, so it's a real big nightmare to replace this apron, quote unquote, the correct way per manufacturer's instructions. How I do it though, on this one, how I'm doing it is you have this plate right here from the factory. It goes all the way back there. It's tied into the firewall, spot welded in, and then this plate comes all the way out here. So I have chose to make my cut across the top right here. So there's actually a hole you can see right here from the factory. I believe this is going to be like a push pin, alignment pin or something. That's going to be your hole for your fender. So I don't ever cut through a bolt hole, but I'll always try to cut through some kind of body hole. You know, that way I can get the same on that side over there when we do that. So we went ahead and took these spot welds that fall within our cut zone and drilled these spot welds out. So when we're finished with everything, the goal here is to still have this plate undisturbed on the inside, so that when the buyer pops the hood, you know, in the future or whatever, this plate's not cut up. Now we'll of course weld these spot welds and clean these spot welds up, and then we'll actually probably re-base coat from the corner out is my thoughts right now, along with the whole upper and apron on the front, as I'll do that before I do final assembly on the vehicle. And then I've simply just come through here and slowly just cut sections out of the face of this apron and peeled it open and pried it back to get through my spot welds. I actually drill my spot welds from this side inwards, and then that lines them. They're a little easier to see on the inside with the E-coat. And then I come on the outside with a step down bit and just step them down. So we're gonna literally, we've already cut through this. Once I cut all the face off and got the spot welds, I then took the saw and took a really long blade, and all I do is just cut straight through like that, so that I can get up to that inside plate, but not through that inside plate. And now all we should have to do is keep wiggling this thing out the way, and it should break right off here in a second and fall right off. Now when we do this one right here, we'll go ahead and come, and we're just gonna whack straight through here probably, and then we'll take this one and we're just gonna take the saw and go straight through here we'll lay it on the ground, and then we will unlace this one exactly where we want it to match. So here's our alignment hole on this truck. There's your bolt hole. So this is where we'll be going through, is this alignment hole. And I know I go straight through this hole in the center, and then I actually come on the edge of this one right here. So that gives me a reference point to cut my angles of my cut at a really closely to the same, so that I can get any gaps or anything welded up and not be too far off or too terrible. So, and then we're actually going to join this in the center. So on this piece, this is how I do my cuts. Is originally I was going to cut it over here, but the problem with that is then I could only weld the top and the two sides. I can't really get under the bottom with the frame rail. And if you cut it more towards the center, then you have enough to pull it this way, up and down. There's plenty of leverage to straighten it out. So we're gonna make our cut right here. But the way that I actually find that cut equal, so that it is literally perfect, so I don't have no difference. Of course, you can measure with tape measure, but again, this hole is gonna be the exact same on both trucks. So I literally just make it up every single time. I took that hole, and on this one, I put my speed square right on the edge of the inside of that hole, and then marked it and did the same to the other side. So whenever you're trying to figure out where to make your cuts, you don't have to necessarily measure with a tape measure. You can use reference points inside the metal, whether it's these holes and you measure off of it, stuff like that. I like just to use solid stuff when possible, such as this right here. Then you can't get that wrong. As long as I make a straight cut through there in the bottom, then I'm pretty much going to be freaking spot on within a 1/16 of an inch probably, on that cut being the exact same left to right. So as you can see, we have got this side all off, got our piece taken off, and we have cut through this plate, because this is where your weld's going to go. Your weld's going to go from this direction. It actually wouldn't have been a bad idea to try to go from this direction now that I think about it, but I didn't think about that then, because then I wouldn't have had to clean up welds from the inside. But we're weld from that way. That's the way traditionally you'll be welding. You normally don't weld on the inside of a tube normally, but this one we did it. So actually all of our welds, yeah, we could have literally probably got all of our welds from the inside and not even had to clean up the outside. Oh man. We come through this one and drilled, we actually used a spot weld cutter and drilled this one off. So all we gotta do is come through here with a grinder and clean these up, and there's actually not a hole through this rail. So all we'll have to do is just put this plate up on it off of our parts truck like this. It'll have holes in it. It goes up against there, and you'll just fill in the hole with the weld. All right, so what we have got to do on this side is this top point is too far that way. So we need to pull this center top area. We need to pull this over, so we have it tied off here going that way. That way the bottom doesn't move. This bushing is crooked. Now I've already drugged this rail over with nothing tied to the bottom, and the bushing does not really stand up perfect. So I think that's just all in the bushing. I think the holes are actually aligned. I think it's just from where the front end went over like that. It has kind of just, the rubber has been tweaked out of where it's not sitting in there perfectly straight. Now we could easily, you know, we might jack this up, take that bushing out, and switch it with one out the parts truck. But it's not gonna hurt anything like that. We want to drag this top over. I have took measurement off of that truck, and I don't do anything precise. I do the same stuff y'all can do. I go from here, I picked this bolt right here to this little 7mm in the cowl right here. So that 7mm is going to be the same on both trucks, and it's going to be drilled into the cowl, so it's not going to be something that's that can, you know, be moved. So we were off, I think, 1/2 inch to an inch. I'm about to pull a measurement again. So I mean, it's clear as day that that 7mm is not going to be off 1/2 inch or anything from the accident. Now the cowl was buckled in a little on this side, but it doesn't go past like here. So the metal didn't get distorted up in here or nothing like that. It just kind of got in there. And I've already pulled a measurement from the top of your hood hinge to this body flange right here, and got that within 1/8 of an inch off of that truck the same. Now that top can be bent in and out, you know, so that's gonna be perfectly fine, and there's still play in the bottom of that. So all we're chasing right now before lunch break is just the measurement from here to here. We're gonna pull this top out while we brace this bottom. So we're just gonna go ahead and give ourselves a pull before we pull measurements, and we're just gonna go off of our eyeballs. And we're just physically gonna see that top rail roll out some. now we're gonna stop what we're doing, which it flexes back. But now we're gonna stop what we're doing, and we're gonna pull a measurement and see if that moved at all. Right, so we are off, I just measured it, we're off 3/4 of an inch. So with spring back, we're gonna have to drag this thing over probably at least 1.5 inches before it'll spring back to our 3/4 of an inch that we're off. So we're gonna go ahead and just pull this again, just by eyesight. You could have somebody out there holding the measurements, so you precisely pull to 1.5 inches for spring back, but I'm literally just gonna put some pressure on it like that, and now we're gonna let off of it and check to see if I made any progress on that. All right, if you caught it on that last pull, when we're pulling it like this, we're literally kind of pulling like this. So we have it clamped down here, but we're pulling and everything is just kind of doing like this, the L pattern right here. Okay, pivoting. So what we did in this one, because this one is bent up a little bit from the accident, we want this bottom bar to stay straight like this, and we want this top to go like that. So I have went ahead and just ratchet strapped that one. That one moves pretty easy, but we want to go ahead and just keep it, you know, decently straight, and then we can move it around, or at least straighten it back out. It don't hurt to go down too far because I can just pull it back up. But now we're gonna drag our top again. We did make 1/2 inch of progress on that one, so we got about another a heavy 1/4 inch or so to get out of it. And when I'm pulling that out, I'm almost watching. It's like it's restraining, and then all of a sudden it just kind of lets loose. And to me, in experience, a lot of times it seems like when that lets loose, it's kind of like you've pulled the kink or the resistance out of it. Just in my experience, not being precise on the frame rack. Let's pull that measurement, see how close it is now. All right, so we're gonna bring in the big guns and let Eddie do the pulling while we hold the tape measure. Let's make sure we're on our 7. All right, go ahead and pull that in. So we're gonna try to take this thing. Keep going, I'll tell you when, Ed. We're gonna try to take this thing, I think, to 50.5 and then see what our spring back is. All right, let that off, Ed, until that chain goes slack. Okay, we need more. So this time we're gonna go to 50 3/4 since we went to 50.5 on that last pull. All right, let that off. We'll see what that comes out to. Oh, we're still gonna need more. All right, so this time we're gonna go to 51. Pull it again. So 51 this time. So see, we're kind of starting to watch our spring back, and we're just creeping up on it by 1/4 inch. All right, hold on, I also lost my tape measure. Okay, let that off. That's 51. 50. All right, pull it again. So that sprung back to all the way to 50. So that sprung back 1 inch. So we're gonna go to 51 1/4 this time. All right. Let that off. We close. All right, a little bit more, Ed. We're gonna need a little heavy 51 1/4, and I think we can get everything else out with adjustments. All right. See, that one started going really fast. There's our 50 1/4. All right, that's good, Ed. Let your chain loose. All the way loose. Yep, just want to show everybody chain's loose. And we're gonna go back to our 7. There's our 50 1/4 that we need. Over here to our white truck, you can see we're on the same 7 there, butted to it just like the other truck. And there's our 50 1/4 right here on this white truck. And this white truck is not hit, so that's how I know that this measurement should be the same. Now I can also check after lunch. I'm gonna take lunch. I'll probably check maybe from the firewall forward to make sure that's right. Actually, we'll go ahead and check it real fast now. We'll just butt right here above the computer, and we'll go to that bolt hole That's gonna be 30 and a quarter. Now let's check ours and make sure that that piece over here doesn't need to come forward also. Hopefully it doesn't. We gotta go through a battery on this one. So, it is shy. It's 30 and an eighth. We're gonna let that roll though, because a lot of times I can adjust that out. So we're about 1/8 of an inch back on this one. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and move forward with mock-up, see how it looks. If for some reason stuff doesn't look right in here, then we'll come back in here and then we'll pull that forward. But we're gonna try it without pulling that forward. Oh, what's up? I think y'all missed a couple things. We're back in this F150 in the other booth right now. The paint booth, having to manually shift it down here below the column because I still haven't figured out the shifter issue, but she's off the frame rack. Let me get this thing back in here, and then we're gonna clean all this mud off the front of it, and let me show y'all this real fast. What is up, people? Look at that. We're no longer on the frame rack. We still got our parts truck inside with our frame rack. She's empty. She come off her deathbed, or her, I guess, operating table bed, and now here she is in here. So I have already had the fender on this side. I have already test fitted everything. My door gaps look good. My hood gaps look good once I was finished. It did take a lot of adjustments. I do like to go ahead and disclose that. I don't want to be a YouTuber that makes things look easier than it is. And we actually pulled the front end, I think, too far over that way. So when we were done, our hood was straight and both of our fenders were like in like this, whereas the hood was, you know, it was out of whack. So what it ended up doing is I burnt in the bottom crossbar down there first, and then relieved the bolts for the frame and hooked the chain to this side and just drug the front end that way. Now you can only move the front end maybe this much because it's just inside that hole, whatever that hole allows where the bolt goes through it. So it's not like you can make minor adjustments, but dragging that front end back that way squared our fenders out. When the hood is closed, our fenders are squared out beautifully, and the hood is not closed right now. But the rest of the fine tunement, we're talking 1/16 of an inch adjustments, can all be made in the fenders. There's tons of adjustment room left. So this thing is turning out amazing. Let me pop this hood real fast. We haven't cleaned up anything for paint. Everything's in mock-up, but I've got all my spot welds burning in over there. I've got all my bubble gum laid inside here. I did it on the inside. The welds are nothing pretty, so there ain't nothing to brag about there. I'm not a welder. I'm not a welder. I'm not a welder. I can do this as good as you can in your backyard if you're also not a welder with Harbor Freight, with a Harbor Freight welder. So we got the header panel in, hood latch. It closes perfectly, so everything's centered. It cranked up, come down on its own wheel. Actually did not have to bleed the brake, surprisingly. There was enough brake there to still get it off the frame rack. But I did hook a safety chain to the tow hook to the tower and left a little slack, so when I went to put it in reverse, if it let go, it didn't come down the rack and take out the door and all that stuff with no brakes. So that's kind of dangerous unloading them when you're not sure about brakes, but I felt like we were good, and as soon as I put it in reverse, the safety chain didn't hit, and I was able to stop it with a pedal. So I relieved the chain and pulled it down. We're gonna get this thing power washed right here. I kind of want this thing, it's gonna live in and out like this for the next couple days. So it's gonna be power washed and then pushed in neutral into the booth. We're gonna keep this short and sweet though. I'm gonna just keep breezing through it. It's not a how-to. I promised y'all I wouldn't do a how-to. Just figure out, update y'all that we are out of the booth. Let's get this thing clean.